Increasingly frequent and destructive wildfires, hurricanes ravaging the Atlantic producing extreme rainfalls and flooding, rising sea levels, a vulnerable food supply chain, more intense heat waves. This is not a list of far-off events, nor a list of worst-case scenarios, nor an apocalyptic warning. Each of these events are happening now and are caused by climate change. As people of faith, we recognize the impacts of climate change on people and planet. We have a moral, ethical, and religious obligation to care for the gift of the planet and to fight against environmental injustices disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations. Failing to address the issues of climate change means that we are failing to address issues of race, poverty, class, and economic insecurity. The tools of just peacemaking can be used in an interfaith context in order to combat climate injustice. A just transition to clean energy is critical to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. As we move to a more just and ecologically sustainable economy, we must do so keeping in mind that marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by climate change and environmental injustice. How can we make the green economy more diverse and inclusive than the current one? If we create an economy that is 100% clean energy, but is inequitable, then the only ones benefiting from the clean energy are privileged communities. Though it is common to see nonviolent direct action being used as a tool to combat climate change, as evidenced by climate marches, rallies, civil disobedience, the boycotting of institutions that refuse to divest from fossil fuels, and other nonviolent actions, we can also turn to tools 4 and 6 described in Thistlewaite's text. David Gordis, who provided the Jewish reflection for chapter 4, discusses how reconciliation of human beings with God begins with teshuvah, or return. Key to this idea of return and reconciliation is accepting responsibility for oneself, one's attitudes, and one's behaviors in order to effect change. Once we acknowledge responsibility for conflict, or in this case for climate conflict and disaster, we can begin fostering forgiveness and reconciliation, moving to a green economy centered on justice and equality. Secondly, a vital aspect of just peacemaking, as explained in Thistlewaite's chapter 6, must include a caring for the poor no matter one's religious background. The issue of climate change, and specifically the need for a more just, sustainable, and green economy, disproportionately affects the most vulnerable communities. The ones who have caused the climate crisis the least are the ones suffering the most. Christian, Jewish, and Islamic teachings all highlight the necessity of taking care of the poor. As stated in the Babylonian Talmud, the world will not be at peace before God until people are generous and provide food for the poor. We cannot combat the food crisis or economic insecurity without also combating climate change. Pamela K. Brubaker, in chapter 6, quotes Martin Luther King by stating, "On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed, so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their way on life's highway. Part of transforming this Jericho road must include transforming our economy to be more just and sustainable for the earth and for humanity."